Hi, I'm Lee Kim. Today I have with me Pastor Kong Jin Ai and Mr. Martin Chow. We are going to talk to you about a very interesting video taken as the Dalai Lama arrived at Kangra Airport in Dharamsala on April 25, 2018, which happened to coincide with the 29th birthday of the 11th Panchen Lama, Gedun Choki Nima, as recognized by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In this video, you will see and hear the Dalai Lama recognized for the first time the Chinese recognized Panchen Lama, Gyaltsen Nobu, as the official Panchen Lama. Before we go further into the significance and importance of this video, Martin, would you like to share a bit of the background of the Panchen Lama?
Surely, Kim. The Panchen Lama commands a very prominent position in the minds of Tibetan people and indeed Tibetan Buddhism. The Panchen Lama is widely regarded as being the emanation of the Buddha Amitabha, just like the Dalai Lama is recognized as being the emanation of the Buddha of Compassion, Chenrezig. In that sense, both are Buddhas, and therefore the Panchen Lama is the spiritual equal of the Dalai Lama. The lineage of the Panchen Lama began in the 17th century with the teacher of the 5th Dalai Lama. Now, what is important to remember is that when the Dalai Lama escaped Tibet in 1959, the Panchen Lama, then the 10th Panchen Lama, chose to remain behind in Tibet because he realized that the Tibetan people who could not escape and who were forced to remain in Tibet would be without a leader. So he chose to remain in Tibet so that he could be of comfort to the minds of the Tibetan people who were going under tremendous stress at the time. And being in Tibet also meant that he could be of help directly to the Tibetan people. Now, it is very well known that the 10th Panchen Lama suffered tremendously and even spent some time in prison. But over time, he was able to win the confidence of the Chinese government, and in that way, he was able to create better conditions for the Tibetan people. And then along the way too, he was able to help revive Tibetan Buddhism slowly. So that you see the Panchen Lama is actually a very important position in Tibetan Buddhism. And the Panchen Lama to the people in Tibet and China is what the Dalai Lama is to the people or to the Tibetans in exile. What is also significant about the Panchen Lama is that the Panchen Lamas are responsible for recognizing the Dalai Lamas and vice versa. So in the absence of the Dalai Lama, this is a very, very important position.
Right. And so, to put it quite simply, the Panchen Lama and the Dalai Lama are of equal significance among the Tibetan Buddhist community. Now that we've understood a little bit about the role of the Panchen Lama, how about, Pastor Jinai, you elaborate further on this controversy that surrounds the Panchen Lama role?
The controversy that you're referring to centers on the fact that there are two Panchen Lama candidates. One that was recognized by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Gyaltsen Choki Nima. And after this young boy was recognized in May of 1995, he subsequently disappeared a few days later. And for the last 22 years, his whereabouts have remained unknown. Some maintain that he has been under house arrest, others say that he has been killed. The other candidate was recognized by China using traditional methods as well as the Chinese leadership's independent methods. His name is Gyaltsen Nobu, and he was recognized and enthroned in November of 1995. So this year, when the Dalai Lama made his statements in this particular video, it was done on the 29th birthday of the Dalai Lama's candidate, Gyaltsen Choki Nima. And to this day, the boy, as I mentioned, his whereabouts have remained unknown, and the pro-Tibet groups maintain that he is the world's youngest political prisoner. The pro-Tibet groups have also used this entire controversy to vilify the Chinese government, to make them look bad for violating human rights. But what the Dalai Lama has said in his video actually is a change in stance, because all along His Holiness has also staunchly maintained that the Panchen Lama candidate he recognized, the real one, and the one that was recognized by China is fake.
Right. I guess the next question or relevant question to ask you is, looking at the video taken on April 25th, what are the significant key points that this video highlights?
Okay, the first significant key point is His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying that the Panchen Lama candidate he recognized is alive and well and receiving a good education. What is significant about this is His Holiness also added that he received this information from reliable sources, so he believes it. The second thing that His Holiness also said, which was very significant in the video, was referring to the Chinese-backed Panchen Lama as the official Panchen Lama. And His Holiness also added that this Panchen Lama is receiving a good education from a good teacher, therefore validating and legitimizing the education that he is currently receiving. Now, His Holiness also threw into the video a third point, which maybe not many people may have picked up on. And what His Holiness actually did was refer to an example of a Lama who lived over a century ago, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. And the Dalai Lama referred to Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo as an example of how an incarnation of a Lama may have more than one emanation existing at the same time. So Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, after he passed away, his subsequent reincarnation actually had 5 emanations, which were the body, speech, mind, quality and activity emanations. And these 5 emanations were Zongza Khyentse, the first Palpung Beru Khyentse Rinpoche, Dzogchen Khyentse, Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche, and Zongza Jamyang Khyentse Chökyi Lodro. And of these 5 emanations, it is the mind emanation that will then ascend to the seat of that particular lineage. Now, what is interesting about the 5 emanations I've just mentioned is that the last one, Zongza Jamyang Khyentse Chökyi Lodro, after he passed away, his subsequent incarnations also had 3 emanations at the same time. So it is not just within the Gelug tradition or with the Panchen Lamas that a Lama's incarnation can have more than one emanation existing at the same time. The Dalai Lama was not asked about this in his video, in the interview, but he chose to throw it in anyway.
It was a significant point to throw in, and I'm sure that normal journalists who are just covering news would not pick up on this. I think you would require a deep sense of spiritual knowledge in order to pick up the significance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama bringing up this point. Martin, would you like to add to the significance of this video?
Yes. You see, it also means that the Central Tibetan Administration, the Tibetan government in exile known as the CTA, has been wrong for over 20 years about this issue. That they did not consider the possibility that there could be more than one emanation, and this is the government that is supposed to look after all matters to do with Tibetan Buddhism and have been advised by monks of different lineages. For the last 20 plus years, they have maintained that the Chinese Panchen Lama is a fake Panchen Lama. And not only that, the CTA website, tibet.net, is littered with a lot of literature and articles that criticize the Chinese Panchen Lama and basically ridicule China for having recognized the false Panchen Lama. And not only have the CTA maintained that, they have rallied leaders, people, corporations, and different nations behind this accusation, and they all now look quite foolish, frankly, because as the Dalai Lama has confirmed, the Chinese Panchen Lama is equally as legitimate as the candidate the Dalai Lama recognized back in 1995, that there can be more than one Panchen Lama.
Pastor Jinai, in the history of Tibetan Buddhism, I think that the 11th Panchen Lama's role now having indication that there is 2 emanations. I think that in the past, in history too, there not only this role has many emanations. I think there is more that have several emanations.
You're right. Actually, it concerns his immediate predecessor, which is the previous 10th Panchen Lama. And it's very well known that when the search was on for the reincarnation of the 9th Panchen Lama, that 2 boys were actually identified and recognized as the reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama, but only the mind emanation or the principal emanation ascended to occupy the throne of the Panchen Lama. So in the end, both boys were recognized as reincarnations of the 9th Panchen Lama. One ascended to the throne of the 10th Panchen Lama, whilst the other one was recognized as Panchen Otrul, or emanation of Panchen. And there's a little anecdote that our teacher, His Eminence Tsem Rinpoche, has shared with us before, also concerning His Holiness the 10th Panchen Lama. And it centers on a teaching. So His Holiness the 10th Panchen Lama was in a teaching once, and he started laughing for no apparent reason. There was no joke being told, nothing funny was being done, no one was doing anything funny, and the Panchen Lama just started laughing. So when people asked him, why are you laughing, what's so funny? His Holiness the 10th Panchen Lama said, oh, one of my emanations somewhere else is doing something funny. So you can see that within the Panchen Lama lineage that there is also various further examples whereby more than one emanation of that particular incarnation was existing at the same time. And it's not just scripturally or within the Tibet's history that you see this incident of more than one emanation existing at the same time. Even Hollywood has picked up on this phenomena. And in Bernardo Bertolucci's film, Little Buddha, the title character Lama Dorje, after he passes away, his subsequent incarnation actually comes back as 3 emanations: body, speech, and mind. And what's interesting about this film as well is that Bernardo Bertolucci, he hired as an advisor to the film one of the Kensei incarnations, Zongza Kensei Rinpoche, who was an advisor to the film to make sure that it was philosophically and historically accurate. So you see within pop culture, you see within ancient times, we see within more modern times that there are multiple examples over different lineages in different situations whereby this incarnation can come back as multiple emanations.
Therefore, it is not uncommon.
Yes.
Which means that now with the Dalai Lama recognizing the Chinese recognized Panchen Lama as well as the one recognized by His Holiness himself, it's not uncommon.
Yeah,
and
that's
therefore it would be very believable and should not have any more further dispute. Yeah? Okay, one thing I'm quite curious about, Martin, is if you watch the video, nobody asked the Dalai Lama any question, any clarification. Nobody said, so who's the real Panchen Lama, Dalai Lama? Nobody did. Yet, the Dalai Lama took that opportunity and brought this up himself. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that in itself is what's making this video groundbreaking news, shaking up the Tibetan and Tibetan Buddhist community. What is the meaning there?
Well, Lee Kim, that is a very good observation. Now, there are a few views that one can take with regard to this situation. We can say, which is a very simplistic view, that the Dalai Lama made a mistake in 1995 and recognized the wrong candidate, which the Dalai Lama is now correcting. But that's just way too simplistic. Another very mundane view says that the Dalai Lama is simply saying whatever is necessary and taking whatever actions he needed to appease the Chinese government so that he can go home. There is a third possibility, and we have to remember that the Dalai Lama is not an ordinary person. He is, after all, a statesperson who has, for the last 60 years, been able to keep the Tibetan cause afloat without an army, without financial might, and even without a country. And yet he is being able to muster such tremendous support for his struggle and for the struggle of the Tibetan people. We have to also to remember that the Dalai Lama is Chenrezig, or rather the emanation of the Buddha of Compassion, Chenrezig. And in Tibetan Buddhism, there is this concept called skillful means, which means something or an action undertaken by a very highly attained Lama or enlightened mind, which appears to be harmful or wrong at the beginning, but ultimately creates tremendous benefits for the people and for Tibetan Buddhism. And I think this is what it is, that in 1995, the Dalai Lama recognized one candidate, one reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama. We've already seen that there can be more than one reincarnation, and it is not an unusual phenomena. So in recognizing and appearing to announce prematurely his candidate for the 11th Panchen Lama, the Dalai Lama actually created a situation where the Chinese government would then go out and look for reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama to throw their support behind this candidate to develop and to build and to really rebuild the institution of the Panchen Lama in the embodiment of the 11th Panchen Lama. And in so doing, because the Panchen Lama does not exist in a vacuum, what the Dalai Lama actually managed to do was to get the Chinese government to rebuild Tibetan Buddhism along with it. And it is an extremely skillful way of doing that.
It's like how I would summarize it is like a divine intervention for a much bigger cause that perhaps a lay person could not see it. Yeah. So, and obviously now it is materializing, and with the assistance of both of you putting this video into much deeper context, people can now start to see the significance of what the Dalai Lama did. So, understanding all this, skillful means, multiple emanations, and the Dalai Lama on television recognizing the Chinese recognized Panchen Lama, all this wraps up to something huge and significant. So where do you see this forward movement in terms of the Tibetan community and the Tibetan Buddhist community as well?
Well, I think what is important is to take this video and put it into context of what is happening in the wider Tibetan community at the moment. And what we're seeing now is that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is making an increasing number of overtures towards the Chinese leadership and talking much more about going back to Tibet. The first example we saw was in the form of sending his personal emissary and personal representative Samdong Rinpoche to China. It was a secret trip, and presumably when he negotiated something with the Chinese leadership. This trip was confirmed by Samdong Rinpoche's counterpart, the Prime Minister of the Tibetan people, Losang Sangye, as well as a number of Indian diplomats. The second form of overture that we're seeing now towards the Chinese leadership is the fact that His Holiness has changed his political goals from one of Rangzen, which is total independence, to now one which is Umelam, which is meaningful autonomy, but under the rule of China. So even then, His Holiness is making concessions in terms of the political goals of the Tibetan exiled community. In the case of this video related to the Panchen Lama, when His Holiness actually recognizes the Chinese-backed Panchen Lama as the official one, he's actually removing a thorn, a very large thorn that has been in the side of the Chinese leadership for the last 22 years, because this Panchen Lama controversy has been one of the pro-Tibet group's largest campaigns, and one that they've used very commonly and very often to vilify the Chinese leadership. Now, what I want to do is draw back on something that Martin has said earlier, and that's regarding the symbiotic relationship between the Dalai Lama and Panchen Lama, where both Lamas recognize one another's incarnations. What you're seeing now in the present situation is, what we're left with is this. On the one hand, you have the Tibetans in exile who have no Panchen Lama in order to recognize the 15th Dalai Lama. And on the other hand, you've got China, who has a Panchen Lama candidate who will be able to recognize the 15th Dalai Lama. In this case, the Tibetan leadership in exile have no means or no method or way of recognizing a 15th Dalai Lama candidate according to the traditional system, where they will need a Panchen Lama candidate to do so. In this situation, actually there are many ramifications. The first of which is that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has actually begun the process of legitimizing whoever China selects as the 15th Dalai Lama. The second one is that the Tibetans in exile are now left without a leader once His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama passes away, a leader whom they will need to spearhead whatever political campaigns that they have. And if they press ahead with a recognition of their own 15th Dalai Lama candidate without a Panchen Lama to kind of legitimize this candidate, the whole recognition process is going to be one of confusion and a lot of discussion and debate and argument. The third ramification is therefore that His Holiness is in essence giving up the Tibetan in exile's future and pushing it further and further under Chinese control. At the moment, what we are seeing is that China now actually has both Panchen Lama candidates under them, both the Dalai Lama's recognized candidate as well as their own. And the fourth ramification is that it's very disheartening for pro-Tibet groups to listen and hear what His Holiness has actually said in this video regarding the Panchen Lama, because they've spent the last over 2 decades campaigning very strongly and throwing a lot of resources and raising a lot of awareness to try and so-called free their Panchen Lama candidate, free him from house arrest. Now that the Dalai Lama has said that his Panchen Lama candidate is alive and well and he's receiving a good education, in essence, there is no more such campaign anymore.
He has basically nullified 22 years of campaigning how wrong the Chinese are in dealing with the Panchen Lama recognized by His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Removed one of the means by which the pro-Tibet groups have used to make China look bad.
So, in light of all this ramification, it would look as though the future 15th Dalai Lama would be in the hands of the Chinese as well.
Yeah.
And if the current Tibetan government does not, how do I say, find ways to reconcile with China, to reach out and find positive means to get things working with them, we're going to have big group of Tibetans outside of Tibet, China, living without a leader and probably ending up going everywhere else, and then the Tibetan community further, shall we say, disintegrates into small pockets all over the world. Scatters. Yes, scatters would be a better word than disintegrate. It is quite troubling if we understand deeply what will happen for the future of the Tibetans. So, Pastor Jinai, after you have highlighted the 4 ramifications of His Holiness Dalai Lama's actions with the Panchen Lama, it might even lead us to start thinking what else could be happening here. Given the fact what Martin had said earlier, that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is not any ordinary person, and that there are skillful ways in the actions he takes. So I'm starting to ask if this perhaps is also another form of a skillful way, whereby perhaps the Dalai Lama could be paving the way to return to China gradually but surely. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. It may be that His Holiness, who actually sadly is losing quite a lot of influence and popularity on a global level, is now making a final play to return to Tibet before he no longer has much influence in this relationship between China and India that we're seeing is growing and we're seeing is becoming more positive.
Right. I think everything is a possibility when you take in to the powers of the divine and how they interact and how things will play out. So, talking about how things will play out, where do you see this huge development with the recognition of the Chinese Panchen Lama? How do you see this impacting the Dorje Shugden issue?
So, Likim, how I see this impacting the Shugden community is that the Dalai Lama has softened his stance on many things over the last few years, most recently now with the Panchen Lama issue. Now, with the Panchen Lama issue, it affects all Tibetans because it concerns Tibet's second highest Lama. And therefore, for the Shugden community, what we are thinking is that if His Holiness can reverse his hardline stance on the Chinese Panchen Lama and accept him as the official Panchen Lama, there is a possibility, and it brings hope to the fact that His Holiness may also similarly reverse his stance on the Shugden ban.
I would like to add to Pastor Jinai's point, if I may. Both the Panchen Lama's case and the Dorje Shugden issue have a very close similarity. In both cases, you see that there's a pattern of the Dalai Lama first creating what seemed to be a controversy. So, in 1995, when the Dalai Lama created what I would refer to as the Panchen controversy, it resulted in China investing heavily in promoting the institution of the Panchen Lama, which has since been revived. And in that way, Tibetan Buddhism was revived in China. Now, in the same way, the Dalai Lama created a controversy surrounding the Dorje Shugden issue. As a result, the name Dorje Shugden spread everywhere. In fact, wherever the Dalai Lama went in the world, the name Dorje Shugden would follow. And when people research and look into who this Dorje Shugden is, then this is how they become connected with the deity. So you see this very skillful pattern that the Dalai Lama first create what seems to be controversies, but both resulted in tremendous spread of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, perhaps The Dalai Lama has seen how Tibetan Buddhism has been revived in China, and so it is time now, with his recent announcement, to put an end to the Panchen Lama controversy. Similarly, perhaps it is time for the Dalai Lama to also put an end to the Dorje Shugden controversy, because after all, Dorje Shugden lineage has in fact spread very, very much in the last 2 decades. And after all, it doesn't make sense for the Dalai Lama to now say the Chinese Panchen Lama is the correct one, is the main emanation, is the official Panchen Lama, and then go on to say that this emanation of Amitabha, however, is a demon practitioner. It doesn't make sense to say this is the right Panchen Lama, but he is wrong in his practice of Dorje Shugden. So probably it is high time for the Dalai Lama to reverse his stance on the Dorje Shugden issue, which has created tremendous problems and suffering for a lot of people around the world.
Thank you, Martin, and of course, Pastor Jinai. The both of you have jointly given a much deeper understanding to this video taken on April 25th, 2018, and the significance of what Dalai Lama did in that video, what he said. The actions of the Dalai Lama with regards to recognizing the Chinese Panchen Lama is huge. It's tremendously significant. I think we have not even begun to grasp the magnitude of his action. Ladies and gentlemen, after what was shared here by Martin and Pastor Jinai, it is our wish to shed more light and depth into this video, into what His Holiness the Dalai Lama did by recognizing the Chinese Panchen Lama as the official Panchen Lama. What does that all mean? Maybe the true meaning and essence may not materialize immediately, but we hope that what has been shared here will facilitate your understanding of it. The Tibetan community is plagued by division, lots of infighting. You have Rangzen versus Umelam. You have Lobsang Sangye versus Penpa Sering. You have Utsang Pas versus Kampas, this Kamapa versus that Kamapa, and of course, Dorje Shugden versus non-Dorje Shugden. Till what end will there be more things to be disharmonious about? There is enough suffering in the world, and I don't think that the Tibetan community needs to add on more. With the actions of the Dalai Lama now, the Tibetan people, and more importantly, the Tibetan government, needs to have a look at the true essence of unity, harmony, and the true essence of practicing what the Dalai Lama preaches, which is compassion. End the divides and start with ending the Dorje Shugden ban. If today the Dalai Lama can reverse his stand on the Chinese Panchen Lama, similarly and instantaneously, he can do the same with the ban. And on that note, I thank you for watching, and may all Dorje Shugden practitioners pray for that to happen.